with us tonight. For those of you who had the chance to read about this event and beforehand, all of our students, Dr. Romero is the newly elected school board member, and we will have a conversation with him about his journey through education, his interest in joining the local school board, his visions for the future, and more. I am Dr. Amanda Kruger-Hill. I'm the executive director of the Cowan Institute and professor of education in a diverse society, and I will be moderating. I have some questions, and then we'll open it up for students' questions as well. But just wanted to first start by sharing Dr. Romero's bio, and we'll get to learn more about his experiences as well. But J.C. Romero was elected as the New Orleans School Board member of District 4 in December 2020, so just recently elected. Dr. Romero received his educational doctorate in sustainability, social justice, and participatory culture, which is aligned with the course that many of you are taking right now. After a few years in the classroom and after having been an instructional coach, JC became the deputy head of school and elementary principal of an international school in Bangkok, Thailand. And upon returning to New Orleans, JC worked as a school leader and now serves as chief of staff at Einstein Schools in New Orleans, and continues to be instrumental in empowering students inside and outside of the classroom. And throughout his years, Dr. Romero has seen how impactful the atmosphere of school can be on students. And now, please join me in a warm welcome for Dr. Romero.
Yay!
Yay.
Trust me, I can feel the claps and the positive energy.
They're all muted, but they're coming through.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Hill. It's really a pleasure to be able to do this. I shared with you via text message, this is my first hurrah since being elected. So aside from my swearing in ceremony, so I'm really excited to be here.
Well, we are so excited and grateful as well. Thank you. So I will dive in. I have about 8 questions, but then after that, we'll open it up for questions from all of the attendees. So if you will tell us how you got into education and a little bit about your path.
Yeah. And then, yes, thank you. I'm going to preface this conversation by saying I told Dr. Hill that I was not going to read the questions until right before this because I wanted it to be a conversation and just super organic and natural. So thank you again for having me. I am J.C. Wagner Romero, Jean Carlos Wagner Romero. Like Dr. Hill said, I am the newly elected District 4 school board member, which represents parts of Algiers, the French Quarter, Bywater, and Marigny, so the areas along the river. And I am really excited to be able to represent a super diverse part of our city, or super diverse parts of our city. I have been a lifelong educator, and I know the question is to tell you a little bit about my path. So I grew up in New Orleans. I was born and raised in New Orleans. My family is originally from Nicaragua in Central America. And I attended public schools in the New Orleans area. And I was that kindergartner who had a chalkboard in his bedroom since he was 5. So I used to play school with my stuffed animals, and I knew I wanted to be a teacher when I was a kid. In fact, I was very much that kid who would want to get in trouble because teachers thought back then that clapping chalkboard erasers on the wall, or whatever was a punishment. And to me, it was the most enjoyable thing in the world. And so, so wanting to be a teacher was something that I aspired to engage in since I was a child. I think one of the things that really, I always give credit to my mom when it comes to just like the passion I have for education. From a very young age, she always would tell me that in her eyes, education was the gateway to a future, to a successful future. And so my mom didn't even get a kindergarten education. And so, she can hardly write her own name now, right? And she's in her 70s. And so I know how important an education is and how it can really open up just different gates and doors for a variety of people. And so, one of the reasons, aside from just being that obsessed kindergartner who wanted to play with a chalkboard, as I got older, I never found my own place. So I'm an openly gay man. Want to preface that, have a little bit of a twang. So if you didn't guess, surprise. But I never really found my space in schooling, in K-12 schooling, for a variety of reasons. So one was I came out when I was 15 and a half, almost 16. And at the time, like, adults didn't know how to have those conversations with students, right? It was uncomfortable. It was taboo. We didn't talk about that. We hid that in a closet, this um, invisible closet, and just sort of ignored it. And the other piece was my mom had issues with language access, right? And accessing education and being an active parent in my public schooling experience. And so when I was 16, I essentially said, screw it. I can probably do better by going to work at IHOP, which is what I did. I dropped out of school, worked at IHOP, helped my mom financially. And then from there, did that for a few years, and realized that I didn't want to be a server the rest of my life, right? And so I ended up soon after enrolling at Delgado Community College. I got my GED from Delgado and my associate's degree in English literature. So I'm a reading nerd. And then soon after that, went to Loyola and studied sociology, but unfortunately I couldn't afford to finish my degree at Loyola, so I had to finish it at another university in Natchitoches. Got my master's in education and curriculum and instruction because I entered the field between getting my bachelor's and master's. And then I have a doctorate in educational practice with a focus in sustainability, social justice, participatory culture. So I really am passionate about thinking about specifically raising the voices of undocumented Latinx immigrants in not just New Orleans, but across the country. And so that is sort of my personal JC journey through schooling and career, but sort of through career. But I've been a teacher, I've been an assistant principal, I've been a principal here and abroad. And then most recently, I served as the chief of staff of a charter network. And so I feel really fortunate to, what I used to always tell my students was Dr. Romero started from the bottom, now I'm here, and then played that Drake song. And so I feel fortunate to be where I am today. And I realize that we are at a crazy point in public education given the pandemic, right? And so I hope that I'm able to use my educator lens to support the work that New Orleans Public Schools is doing. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, because I think there's this misconception as to what the school board does. We're not an operational board, we're a governing board, right? So we don't make the day-to-day decisions. I can't put out a vote and say, we're gonna close schools down. But we can support and encourage the administration to make decisions that maybe our constituents might be pushing for. But yeah, so here I am. That's my educational journey. I'm an adjunct professor of education, which is why I'm super excited to be here tonight with ed students. It's one of my most favorite things to do. So was that enough? I hope that was, I could keep going.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. What an incredible journey. And I really relate. My mom was an educator, and she shared the same message with me, which is education is a pathway to success. And so really resonate with that, and I'm so inspired by your story. So congratulations again on your recent win. It's so exciting. I know you shared a teeny bit about this already, but why did you decide to run for school board in New Orleans? Let us know a little bit more about that.
So it was very unexpected. One thing I think people will eventually learn about me is that I don't like being in the public eye. I actually very much like my privacy. I like going to work, doing my work, and then being able to just unplug and just like watch Netflix, have a glass of wine with my husband and hang out with our dogs. And so running for public office wasn't really something that I looked to do. But full transparency, the school board member that represented me in District 4 um, did not, I'm trying to be very thoughtful in my wording, but did not share the same values that I have, right? And did not essentially, and there's public information out there, and for whoever is interested, you can Google it. But did not believe that a person like me should be working with children, first of all, should have kids, right? Should have the same rights as any other family. And so honestly, the way that this happened was Thursday of qualifying, I saw that no one was running against her. And I literally was at home because we were working from home at the time. I turned to Alex, my husband, and I was like, do I do this? No one is doing it. And I know, I have connections in the education world, and I consider myself a successful educator. And so Alex is always, and Dr. Hill, you'll meet him one day. He's always like, whatever you want to do, I will support you. And so I went and qualified Friday, the last day of qualifying at like 4:00. And so that was essentially the catalyst for my running for office, right? But for a very long time, I've been saying that not just in New Orleans, across the country, we really need to see people who have been in the trenches, working in the field of education as teachers, as school leaders, having a say at the governing level, right? And so at the school board level. And I think, you can, no politics aside, I think I look forward now to an era in the country where we're going to have somebody who has a strong background in education, helping to make decisions for education across the country, right? And so that's how I feel about just sort of the local landscape. And so those were the two main reasons for my deciding to run for office. But yeah, like I said, I'm not. I enjoy like teaching my students at the college level. I enjoy coaching principals and teachers, and then going home and chilling. And so, this is all very new to me. But I think that we're at a really critical point in public education in New Orleans where we can do transformational work, and we probably don't even know the amount of transformational work we can be engaging in, which I think is why this experience tonight is super important to have, a lot of students that are at Tulane studying education, having them understand just the power that there is in the work that's coming, in the future for them. So.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you decided to run and that you won.
Me too.
Well, since many of the students are just starting to learn about the education ecosystem in New Orleans, how would you describe it? What do you see as the key features, and what do you think is important for them to understand?
Mm. I can speak to Orleans Parish, right? I've worked both in Jefferson and Orleans. I'm going to speak to Orleans. I think the way to describe it is complex. We have a very complex system, right? We have the only system in the country that's 100% charter schools. And I think, I often get asked, what do I think about charter schools? It's so much more than just I feel this way about schools, right? There are a lot of different puzzle pieces that make up public schooling in New Orleans. And so I think it's super complex. But I think that we have a unique system that certainly needs tweaking, right? I think that we're still trying to figure out how to better ensure that every kid in every neighborhood has access to a high quality education, to diverse kinds of schools. And so we're working on that. And I think that is part of what the complexity, right, of why New Orleans public schools and just like the New Orleans public school system is super complex. But it's a good thing in my eyes. I think that we have the opportunity to be super innovative. We have the opportunity to really sort of take education to a new level, right? We've been forced to use technology more than ever before. It's been a headache. It's been a heartache for many, right? But it also has forced us to think creatively about how we do schooling. And so I know the other part of your question, I'm pulling it up, is what key features do I think are important to understand? I think some of the things that are important to understand is we have a decentralized system, right? So we have not networks and pockets of schools that are run by independent nonprofits that then report to the New Orleans public school system and board. And so, schooling can be different for every kid anywhere in the city. And so there's not like a centralized way of doing things. And so one of the things that I like to ensure that my undergraduate students understand is that if you're teaching a year or two at Paul Havens Elementary School in Algiers, your experience transitioning to maybe Einstein charter schools in the East is going to be different, right? Because of just like the community, the way that those networks operate, the way that they do schooling, whatever, a lot of networks have a focus. So it could be a focus on college prep, a focus on the arts, a focus on STEM. And so really it's just, if you are going to be working within the New Orleans public school system, you do have an opportunity to like think about, to take a step back, reflect on what you're passionate about, and then try to find the school network or the school that is going to also meet your passions and your needs, right? Not just the passion that you all might have for being a teacher in education, but also maybe you're an artist and you want to be in that kind of environment. You have the opportunity to do that. And so yeah, so I think that those are some of the key things to think about, especially if your thought process is to be in the parish of Orleans in the future. And we need amazing teachers in New Orleans, right? We have a revolving door of teachers and school leaders. Unfortunately, every few years, education is a very complicated field. And so I like to be super realistic with my students. And so just know that it is going to be really hard work and you're going to be underpaid and probably undervalued. And so that's the hard thing to chew, right? That's a hard pill to swallow. And so, but I think at the end of the day, I got into it knowing that I was building the foundation for every other career, every other, possibility. And I was opening doors through being a teacher for kids and families. And so I think going into the field and going into the New Orleans landscape of education with that mindset is super helpful as you navigate sort of your own path and your own destiny.
I love
Does that,
that.
does that make sense? I hope that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And then you shared some of this in your description of the key features of the system, but what would you highlight as any additional strengths or challenges of our ecosystem here in New Orleans?
Mhm. I think some of the strengths, again, are we can be super innovative in how we do education, right? Um, we have the opportunity to, if we come together, and I think that's one of the things I've been pushing in like early school board meetings. I just got sworn in 2 weeks ago and I'm already like, all right, like I have a million things that I want to talk about. And so one of the things um, that I have been trying to raise up and will continue to do so is we have the opportunity to diversify the schools that we have in New Orleans, right? Like the system that we have, I think it's important for people to understand that it is very like there are people who are not fans of the system that we have, and people's feelings and opinions are valid no matter what. I don't have the right to tell you how to feel or think, right? But it is very hard to dismantle a system. And so the system that we have now, we can think of it in a creative way and we can say, hey, let's work together and I encourage teachers to do this. Like you have the opportunity to submit a charter to the New Orleans public school system if you think of a creative school that you think might better meet the needs of a group of students in New Orleans. And so I think that's super exciting. And I think some of the other sort of strengths are, I often tell people that, yes, I believe in neighborhood schools to a certain extent, because I know that I want to be a super engaged parent one day. And so my school is Alice Hart. The elementary school assigned to I live a block away. And so I always tell folks, I want to make sure that I'm the parent who's able to go to the PTA meetings, right, in the evenings and who can go to the games, right around the corner. But I also know that if I end up having a child with severe special needs, that I have the opportunity to send them to Noble Minds or whatever other school that really hones in on supporting students with special needs or exceptionalities. And so I think those are the like great things if we think about it that way. Some of the challenges I think that we have are, and these are things again that are public that I shared throughout the campaign and that I'm going to continue raising up, are because we have such a decentralized system of schools. Um, there often is just like their weird communication lines, right? The expectations might feel different for some schools that, as opposed to others. And so I've often said that I believe in the centralization of some things, right? Right now, I'm talking about right now with the system that we have. And so an example of that is I was in a board meeting 2 weeks ago where um, I'm the chair of the accountability committee for the district. And so we were having conversations on attendance, right, versus enrollment. So a kid could be enrolled in a school but may not be attending. And so each school network, so each nonprofit that runs a group of schools has their own sort of attendance tracker, or whatever the system that they use to keep track of students and to keep attendance. And so there are sometimes, so then let me take a step back. So then the district asks school leaders to submit their numbers, right? And so I believe in data and numbers, but I also believe in like data that's reliable and like credible, right? And so I often worry, a principal might be struggling and they might say we have 250 students that are attending to show that their school is thriving. But really the reality could be 220. And so I worry about just the accountability piece in terms of like how reliable is the data that we have. And so, I brought up the idea in the midst of a pandemic, we should be thinking about centralizing attendance so that we can deal with truancy issues right away instead of there being sort of roadblocks, like 3 different roadblocks before it gets to us at the New Orleans Public School Office. And so again, I think that going back to my firm belief of we're in a space right now to be able to shift some of the things that we're doing to make them better. And that's just an example of one of those things that we can improve. And so, yeah, that's how I feel about some of the strengths and areas for growth.
Thank you for sharing your perspective on the strengths and areas for growth, as well as some solutions and already, taking steps to implement some of those solutions. The next question is from one of the other professors of education in a diverse society. So I'll read it here for you. It is said that one of the benefits of an all charter district is that each charter school has the autonomy to make its own decision for the school. However, do you ever think about giving the board more power over schools like in a traditional district? For example, there is one charter school named after a white supremacist, and many in that school community have been advocating for a name change. The school has not taken formal action at this point. Is this something that the board can force them to do? And if not, should it? As you're absorbing that, I know you were talking about some ways that the school district might be able to centralize. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that complicated and important question.
Yeah, I think that's a super duper great question. And yes, there are, so yes, right, schools have the autonomy to make their own decisions. I do think that it would be great to give the board a little bit more power over I don't want to use the word power, but maybe authority or like operational authority to do things to streamline the processes that we have in place right now. And so I just gave you an example of that, right? I think to touch on the issue of the school names, I do want to highlight that that is something that I am passionate about because given my like personal background, educational background. And so I know that the previous school board had started that process and we're continuing the process of changing names of schools that are named after white supremacists, right? And so just know that that is in the works. I'm on the properties committee now. Like I'm still learning what that means because finance, properties, And like, yeah, finance and property are probably my two areas of growth. I'm like, I can talk to you about pedagogy and like practice all day long. But when it comes to you know, the like intricate details on how do we go about changing a name? Like there are a number of steps that I'm still learning, right? And so so just to raise that up, that is happening and it will continue to happen, and we're going to continue to push that. I know that in previous board meetings and also just informal conversations that I've had with board members one-on-one, I know it's something that is of importance to us all, and so that we'll continue to explore. And then just going back um, to the topic of having more of an opportunity to, or more of a say in what happens in the school district, I would love to see that. I think that again, we have a board unlike any other that we've had in recent times, right? We have people on the school board now, on the Orleans Parish School Board in particular, who have been educators in schools, right? Who have been teachers and school leaders. And so I think that that completely shifts the dynamic of what public schooling could be in New Orleans. And it really excites me. And so part of me is like, yes, because I would love to have more say in what's happening everywhere. But then the other part of me understands that like the system right now is, I trust that the superintendent will use facts and data to make decisions, and then I will, as a school board member, back him or challenge him if there's an issue that I see that maybe should shift in a different direction. And so, so yeah, that's a great question. It's just, and it's something that I ponder on all of the time, given how unique we are.
I really appreciate your thoughtful answer to that question, and also the work that you're doing and the board is doing to change names. I think that's such an important step.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that it's important that I'm glad that the city has taken that step, right? And I'm
Yes.
slowly seeing other cities and other school districts also slowly doing that. And so I'm really excited about that. And we're naming, you know, we're beginning to think of names of legends who just have been powerhouses in New Orleans in particular. Yeah, so I always, you know, with my background, I always think of things through an equitable lens, as much as I possibly can. But I'm also always open to people pushing my thinking, because I don't know everything, right? And so if any students want to share feedback on especially the name changing as we continue to navigate that conversation, that would be super duper helpful. And I'll put my information, my contact info in the chat box afterwards.
Thank you so much. So now is the portion of the time when we're going to turn it over to students for questions. So I'm going to give us about 2 minutes for people to type in questions that you have into the Q&A. Or if you are able to, I'm not sure if students are able to do it in the chat, but you can definitely do it in the Q&A. I see one already. And then if you're someone who prefers to do things verbally rather than in the question and answer, you can put a raised hand and then I'll just call on you and we'll give you the option of coming off of mute. So a few different ways of asking questions. I'll give people a minute or two to do that. Go for it, Dr. Romero.
Yeah, oh my gosh, I love it. I'm nerding out right now. Guys, I really want you to know that teaching future teachers is my favorite thing. So I am really excited about these questions. I am geeked out right now. So I'll start with the first one. In today's climate, equality is a hot topic. What are some key ways to teach and push the idea of equality in schools? So first, I think it's important. One of the things that I, as a researcher, have been, well, I had been thinking about this before I started working on my doctorate, but Dr. Hill and Kelly, I hope that we can have this kind of conversation offline, is, you know, I have worked at a few colleges teaching undergraduate courses and get so frustrated that a lot of programs are like, okay, you're required to take one course on multiculturalism, and it's the survey course where you don't really dig deep into the issues of the many isms that exist in society, where we unpack issues of race and, you know, gender, issues of gender, LGBTQ issues. And so I think first, to anonymous attendee number one, it is important for us as educators who are doing this kind of work, both in K-12 and at the college level, to take a step back and sort of, I don't want to say reinvent, but really shake up the way that we do teacher preparation. And so, yeah, equality is a hot topic, but I'm often disappointed because again, I'm a nerd. So I look at syllabi and like course offerings and things at different colleges just to see how they're doing, prepping teachers or future teachers. And so I think it's important for us to take a step back and think about how we can start, instead of just requiring students to take a multiculturalism course, how we can push for offering courses that really unpack all of the issues that you're going to face as a teacher. You're going to see poverty, you're going to experience it. Even if you did not grow up in that kind of environment, your eyes are going to be open to it, and it's going to impact you way more deeply than you possibly could think. And you have to be prepared to have those kinds of meaningful conversations in a way that is competent, right? We need to be competent, we need to understand in a way that is reflective. So as the teacher, you taking a step back, reflecting on your own biases, on your own privileges, understanding, reflecting on the experiences of your students, and then essentially figuring out how to unpack those issues in your own classroom. I mean, these issues come up in kindergarten, right? They may not come up directly in like a kid raising their hand and saying, I'm Black and I'm poor, or I'm white and I'm poor, or whatever, or I'm gay. But they come up in like the way kids treat each other, in how you engage with parents. And so you have to be able to learn the skills, but also the historic traumas that many people in our community have gone through over time, to be able to push for true equity in school, in public schooling. And so that's why I'm really excited to not only serve on the school board, but also work with local teacher preparation programs to shift that, so that we can really be much more intentional in in the conversations that we're having, and how we challenge these issues of gender inequality and racism, and all those things. And so thank you so much for that question. The second person, Dr. Hill, do you want to read them so that it's just not me talking out loud?
Sure, that's great. But if you'd like to, either way is great. The second person asked, anonymous attendee number 2, if you could offer any advice to an upcoming teacher, what would that be? And I think you've shared so much great advice already for aspiring educators.
Yeah, and I think, yes, and I think the only other piece, I mean, there are lots of things, and I hope to be invited back, so wink, wink. I think one of the biggest things that I tell teachers, because I also coach teachers and I coach leaders, the biggest advice is to, obviously, hopefully you're passionate about what you're doing, right? But to be a reflective practitioner. That is the biggest advice that I give. Be open to feedback. I don't want to call it criticism. Be open to feedback, be reflective, and be okay with having icky conversations. And that is really going to just like, you're going to fly really high with that kind of mentality, right? We talk about fixed mindset versus growth mindset. That growth mindset is real, that fixed mindset is real. So be willing to grow. Even in the role that I'm in now, I'm always like, I'm a lifelong learner, and I want to reflect on the feedback that I get from people and then learn from that. And then the things that I find useful and helpful deep inside of me, I try to incorporate it into my daily practice. And other things maybe not so much, but I think being a reflective practitioner and being okay with navigating conversations that might be uncomfortable is going to be super important, because the landscape of America is changing. It's changing very quickly. And the landscape of education is also going to continue to change. And so that mindset and that wanting to be innovative is going to really help propel you into a super duper bright future.
Such great advice. The next question is from Maya, and it is, what can we do here at Tulane in order to make our learning environment more accessible?
Hmm. Well, I think Tulane has made strides, and I may be wrong, so I don't want to talk incorrectly. And Dr. Hill, please feel free to chime in. I think Tulane over the years has begun to provide access for a more affordable education to people who maybe would not have been able to 10 years ago attend Tulane University. And so I think the like College of Professional Studies, Professional Advancement,
School of Professional Advancement.
I think is a unique way to be able to provide or to be able to allow for learning to be more accessible to people, right? To a vast variety of people. I think one of the things that is often talked about in the community, and again, you can please correct me publicly, I am okay with that, is, we get a lot of white educators that maybe, or white people that graduate from Tulane. And so I want to see a very diverse cohort of teachers coming out of that program. And so I think, you guys have now got Kelly, you've got Dr. Hill, and a ton of professors who have that mindset, who understand that and who know that, who are wanting to shift that. And so I think that is step one, and it's headed in the right direction. And so I'm really excited for that. And hopefully I can be a partner as you continue to navigate that process.
We really value that partnership and share that vision.
Good, good.
The next question is, do you have a primary goal for your time in your position? I'm sure you have many.
I have lots. Let's see. I do have a lot of goals, and I think a lot of my goals are really hefty, and they're probably goals that are easier said than done. And so I'm trying, again, I'm the biggest optimist in the world, and so I'm trying to bring a lot of my optimism to reality. And so my biggest goal is to be able to ensure that we have A-rated, whatever that might mean in the future. So high quality, easily accessible schools for children in every neighborhood, so that education doesn't feel like a difficult feat for them and their families. And I think the other really big thing for me that's super, super important is I want to improve language access within the realm of education, so that people whose first language is not English, don't feel like they cannot be an integral part of the schooling process for their kids in New Orleans. And so I feel personally, as a Latino que habla español, who speaks Spanish, I feel like it would be a disservice for me to sit on the school board and not champion for people who come from communities that I come from, right? So there's that goal, and that's very personal. But also, I shared earlier, my mom can't read or write in her native language, and so it is my goal to ensure that we have the structures in place, that we have the right people in place, that will ensure that every single person in this city, and again, super optimistic, and I'm going to find a way to make it a reality, whether it's in the next 4 years or beyond. But I want to make sure every single person in the city feels engaged, involved, valued when it comes to how they are part of public education in New Orleans.
I'm even more inspired. The next question is, how was your experience teaching in another country? How is it different from your experience in the US education system?
That is a great question. Sorry, let me okay. So my experience teaching in another country was absolutely incredible. So I actually taught for, I'm sorry, I didn't teach, I was a principal for a British school in Bangkok. And so it was a very diverse experience, right? We followed the Cambridge curriculum of the UK. And it was important for me to learn the culture of the community that I was serving as a school leader. And so the experience was different in that, I'll take a step back and break it down. So my experience in Thailand, I was the principal of a 95% Muslim school in Bangkok, whose population was primarily families from Africa, um, from Guinea in particular, from Indonesia, Malaysia, and Cambodia. And we had a few ties. And so the difference there was that I was going into an experience, and this is as a marginalized human being, right? As an LGBTQ man, a Latino whose family didn't have access to language. So I understand the struggle. And so I had to then be the one who had to really, really understand the struggles of others, right? It was like, boom, having to be immersed in a different culture, a different religion, a different just general setting. And so um, that experience was transformational. I always tell people that it really pushed my thinking about culture, issues of culture, equity, um, power, influence, all of the things that we talk about in multiculturalism courses. Um, but I think one of the things that I often felt was, and I don't know why, so I can't give you a why for it, but I always felt that as a school leader, I could be really innovative and creative in my leadership, and teachers could do the same in their classrooms without the pressure of standardized testing. Actually, I just answered my own question, without the pressure of standardized testing. And so there was standardized testing, but that was not the focus. And I think that we often feel like that is the focus of our teaching and our leadership, is to ensure that we make that grade. Whereas there, it was very much like, I am working to build global citizens. I am working to cultivate creative thinkers, whatever the case might be. And so, so I think that's what was different about it in comparison to my experience in the US education system.
What an interesting experience.
Yeah, it
Um,
was incredible.
Sounds like it. The next question is, do you feel that Catholic schools have better advantages than public schools?
um, no, I don't think so. I don't. Just in short, no, I don't think so. Um, I think, I mean, most Catholic schools, like generally speaking, follow a lot of the same sort of structures and curriculum and things like that. And so, I don't think so. I think the I think a lot of, and this is just from like personal experiences from talking to educators that teach in Catholic schools or private schools, they might feel like they have a bit more autonomy or freedom or whatever, but I don't think that's an advantage. I think we in public schools in New Orleans have the opportunity to be innovative, and I think that is an advantage. In just generally speaking, thinking big picture.
Yes, absolutely. Next question is, what are your main takeaways from our era of education during a pandemic? How has COVID reshaped or challenged your view of education in District 4?
Maya, that is a super duper great question. I think so. As an Orleans Parish school board member, I did get elected by the people of District 4, but I represent all New Orleanians, right? Um, I think this era of education in the last year has taught me um, just how incredibly resilient our educators are. I think we have not gotten enough credit. We talk about frontline workers in healthcare. Teachers had to completely change the way they did things for children at the drop of a hat. And so I really try to ensure that when I'm having conversations with people who are frustrated about, oh, I can't enroll my student in school right now, or I can't get into this school, or the teacher's not doing this or that. I think it's important for us to take a step back. So remember when I shared that it's important to be a reflective practitioner? I think it's important to take a step back and think about how we as leaders expected teachers to completely change what they were trained to do, um, and change how they were doing things into this like way different sort of manner of doing things. And so um, COVID has really taught me that, and I think it really has helped me push or it has helped me think about how we can continue to be more innovative when it comes to the use of technology beyond COVID, right? We will get through this. We're resilient people. New Orleanians are resilient human beings. We have gotten through a lot over the years, and I know we're going to get through this. And so beyond COVID, I think it's super important for us to think about, well, cool, I had to be pushed on how to use technology in the classroom. How can I do that more, right? Or what other technologies are out there that can essentially be used in my classroom for innovative teaching and practice. And so I think those are the things that I think about a lot, but also realistically speaking, we have to take a step back and think about all of the inequities that have arisen as a result of COVID, right? Lack of access to technology for a vast variety of our families, majority families of color, poor families of color. A lack of access to the internet, a lack of an unintentional, sometime or mostly, and a lack of kiddos being able to get the student support services that they need in person, and so those issues have to, if they haven't already, they should really push our thinking about how we're doing schooling, right, in general. And so those things also come up, and I think about it a lot. And I'm an emotional human being, and I get, this is pillow talk. My husband's also an educator, so this is pillow talk, and I often cry over like wanting to ensure that every person in the city has everything that they need, but I know that that's not the case. And so COVID has taught me that we need to, so going back to our decentralized system, we need to really think about how we can centralize some things like student support services so that we can ensure that all students across the city are getting the services that they need in a time like this. And so COVID has certainly helped me think about a lot of different things. And I think those issues of inequity, and I hope Dr. Hill and any other professors that are covering this or teaching courses on multiculturalism and justice in education really unpack that some more. Because again, I shared earlier, this is our time to be innovative, and like these are the conversations we need to have so that when, or if and when something like this happens again in the future, we're better able to act on our feet, really quickly, and are better able to navigate these critical conversations.
Absolutely. The next question is related. It's from Zachary. With COVID quarantine affecting many people's mental health, do you think it's a good idea to introduce mental health as part of the curriculum? If so, how can this be done with younger kids, specifically under high school?
Sure. So yes, I think absolutely yes. I'm a vulnerable human being. I'm not ashamed of sharing my life experiences with people, Zach. So thank you for that question. I suffer from immense anxiety, and I have my entire life. And so I know that that is a mental health issue, right? And so one of the things that I really was excited about when I taught when I was a school leader in Thailand was we were, I don't want to say forced, but we were required to teach PSHE, which was personal social PSHE, personal social emotional health education, and it was an hour the very first period. And so we got to talk a lot about mental health issues, but it was also an opportunity for us to talk about the many isms that exist in society, just sex education, all of, that was that time. And we talked, and it started at a very young age. And so I would love to see that be a part of schooling in New Orleans, and we can be a leading district when it comes to incorporating mental health education into our day-to-day practices and curriculum. And so as somebody who struggles, I don't want to say with mental health issues, but as somebody who struggles with like anxiety and who has worked since I was a child to tackle that issue that I have struggled with, I think it's important for us to for us to have those kinds of conversations in our day-to-day work in schools. And so I know I, as a kid, could have used that kind of conversation in my class. And so I know that we have, and again, COVID has really heightened mental health issues, right? People who never were depressed before are now suffering from depression, and like, maybe had underlying issues that weren't so in your face, that are now starting to bubble up. And so that same thing goes for teachers, right? So we need to find ways as a school district and as school leaders, so a challenge to school leaders, to be able to have conversations around mental health with teachers and support staff and anyone who works in the school building, so that it doesn't continue to be a taboo issue to talk about, right? And so, yeah, so great question. Thank you, Zach.
So we've wrapped up our questions in the Q&A, but we have some that came in through the chat.
Okay, good. It's like, I'm not ready to go.
Do you want to do 2 more?
We can do as many as you want. I can make my answers a little more concise.
No, they've been wonderful. The next one is from Alexandra. Alexandra, do you want to come off mute, or should I ask it for you? I can give you the chance. I can allow you to talk. Would you like to? I'll go ahead and keep asking.
Okay.
Unless you're ready, Alexandra. No? Okay. All right. What do you think is the most effective way to curb absenteeism? Do you think that absenteeism can be considered a symptom of a larger issue that needs to be addressed? And if so, how would you approach this issue?
Incredible question. It is absolutely a larger issue that needs to be addressed. I think about my own life experience, right? I often would skip school to go work, right, to support my family. And so I think, centralizing how we do attendance in New Orleans would really help curb that in a way that at least would flag in a very centralized way students who are not showing up to school, and so that we can have social workers and counselors follow up with them, do homeschool or home visits, whatever the case might be. I think it's really frustrating that those who provide student support services like social workers and counselors are often the last ones to be thought about when it comes to hiring people to work in schools, right? And so I think we need to be better as a school system in thinking about how to budget better and how to ensure that we have more people that can support students who are chronically absent, who have those mental health issues that might be bubbling up. And so that's one thing, right? And then the other thing is, the larger picture is, yes, we can talk about how racism plays a role in absenteeism, and how that and the intersectionality of racism and poverty and a lack of language access, and all of those things are reasons why kids are often absent, right? Like, I would have to skip a day of school to go with my mother to her doctor's appointment to translate for her, right? And so, yes, I think that absenteeism is certainly, in many, many instances, a symptom of a larger issue or larger issues that we need to address. And I think that teacher prep programs are great spaces to have that kind of dialogue. I also think that, school boards are great spaces to have that kind of dialogue. And so thank you for bringing up that question, because it's something we don't talk a lot about. And so we should be.
We really should. I'll keep reading the questions. So the next one is, just want to know if you keep an eye on students who are very sensitive. In adolescent time, there are many students who care very much about what the teacher says, and even feel sad because the teacher's unintentional words, but then seldom say it out. Would like to know how you notice this situation in general? Great question.
That is a really great question. And thank you for asking that, because that just shows how you are wanting to build a good relationship with your students, to understand their feelings and their emotions, because they're so valid and important. So I think once you're teaching, once you've taught for a few years, you begin to understand the little quirks of kids, and you begin to understand the um, behavioral responses to issues that are happening at home or in the classroom. And so you begin to watch out for that. I always, I was taught in a more modern way when it comes to discipline and like addressing student needs, and it's never in a public space, right? But ensuring that a kid, I go up to a kid. I can think of students who maybe had exceptionalities. I taught fourth grade at one school one year. Students had probably about 40% of my students in that one class with exceptionalities, and so I always had to really ensure that when I was teaching, I was very observant to I was very observant with regards to how they were reacting to my teaching physically, right? How they were reacting to my teaching verbally. And so I think that it is our job as teachers. And again, that's one of those things you can't really learn in a teacher prep program. Like you can learn how to work with students with exceptionalities and things, but once you build those solid relationships with your students, you'll know their quirks, and you'll know the things that may trigger them, and then you on a personal level can handle those situations in a way that makes them feel comfortable and valued and appreciated and loved.
Thank you for sharing that wisdom. It's really beautiful. Next question. My younger brother was in a special education program at a Jefferson Parish public school. There are some amazing teachers who eased him and the bullying he faced there. My question is from the parent perspective. What is the best way to find the right place for your child with exceptionalities with the presence of a lottery system? What exactly is the lottery system, and does it allow for choice to find a good fit?
Oh, that's a hefty question. Thank you so much, Shoshana, for bringing one of my favorite names, for bringing that up. So I think Jefferson Parish is unique in that it's a very centralized system. You go to your neighborhood school and that's it, right? And so um, I think that we we have a semi-lottery system, right? Like you put your preferences and I'm not sure how the algorithm works. It's actually one of the things that I've asked for training on so that I can ensure that I give better information, factual information to the community at large. But I think one of the benefits of Orleans Parish is that you at least most of the time get into one of the top two or three schools that you choose, right? And so there are different lottery systems. Like I've seen, I don't know, Amanda, if you've seen like Waiting for Superman, right? Where in New York they have an actual lottery system where like a bingo ball roller thingy, and they pick out the number, and that's how the child gets into that school. But I think now a lot of systems are shifting from that kind of lottery system to a system where yes, you can put your preferences, but also you're able to share if your child has exceptionalities, if your child has interests in the arts or science or career tech education and those kinds of things. And so I think that eventually can help find the right fit for some families. But Shoshana, to be quite honest with you, I think that's one of the things. The system that we have in place is certainly a system that we have a lot of growing to do in when it comes to placing students in the right schools, and ensuring that students get into the schools that their families want them to get into, to ensure that all of their needs are met. So I think that there's a lot of growing to do, but definitely we're slowly getting there, and this is how we get there, having these kinds of conversations and being able to push each other's thinking. I know it's 6:30, Dr. Hill, but I actually would like to answer the question on LGBTQ students.
Yes, yes. Do you want me to read it? No, absolutely. We know that LGBTQ plus students often, unfortunately, do not feel safe in traditional schools. We also know that many English language learner students aren't being serviced properly, unfortunately, in traditional English speaking schools. Do you ever think that it would be a benefit to have a charter school designated to serve certain subsets of students that they can opt into if they want to?
Yes, I absolutely think so. And I think that that is the innovation that is meant to happen within the charter school system. But we need people who are creative thinkers like you, Brooke, to help make this happen, because I would so support an endeavor like this. So an example of that is Dr. Vera Triplett, who is a former assistant superintendent for the Recovery School District. She saw a need for a school that would really only focus on students, on working with students with exceptionalities, like true exceptionalities, whether they were behavioral, academic, whatever. And so she said, I am observing, as a school leader, I'm observing that there are some schools that maybe aren't providing the services, the adequate services that I believe to be adequate to this population of students. And so she took a lot of time to do research, thoroughly, did the charter application, which is a very, 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 very hefty process, tedious process, and opened up a school that is now on Carrollton Avenue near St. Charles that is focused on that group of students. And so, yeah, I do think that that would be super cool. I think one of the challenges to that is we have to be super careful, though, of not beginning to create pockets of exclusion, right? Where, oh, that's the school for the Mexicans or for the Asians who don't know English, or that's the school for the gay kids. And so I do, so like the benefit is, yes, we can be innovative and have these kinds of schools, and I would support it. But my challenge to people who are thinking about these kinds of things is, how can we do better in schools that are already in existence, right? And so we know that EL students are not always properly served in schools. It's the reality of it. And I would love to meet a school leader who would challenge me and say, we're doing it perfectly, because I don't know one who is. And so I think, or servicing LGBTQ students properly so that they feel comfortable and are using, are intentional about pronouns and, gender neutral bathrooms, if that's the case, or whatever the case might be. But I think that yes, I think that we have a very unique system in New Orleans where that can be a thing, and you can make it possible. But also, I want to push us to think about how we can do better in the schools that we have now.
Do you want to take the final one, or should we close it out now?
No, we can take it. I am all yours. I blocked out because I know myself and I know I talk a lot. So
No, this is incredible. The final question is, have you ever experienced hardship from students or parents being a proud gay person?
yes. Yes, absolutely. Especially as a teacher, right? Like, I remember when I first started teaching, I never had like direct people who were like super direct in how in like sharing that they were uncomfortable or anything. But there were little things like, oh, can I move my child from that class, his class, to another class? Or I refuse to hide who I am. Like, it took me years to be very proud of who I am as a human being. So beyond being an educator, being JC, a gay man, a Latino, like I used to hide being a Latino, right? Like I used to tell people I was half white when I was a kid, just because I wanted to fit in and I wanted them to think a little more highly of me. And so it took me a lot of time to get to where I am. And so that's their bad. You know what I mean? If they want to move their child, cool, that's on you. I know I'm an exceptional teacher, and I know that I'm passionate, and I know that I love this work. And so it's your loss, really. But yeah, the hardships, and they continue, right? Like, one of the things that I'll share with you before we close out is, we have people in the community who are very, very passionate about social justice, but sometimes I'm saying we, just broadly speaking, are passionate about one aspect of social justice, right? So maybe it's like issues of race are my passion, or issues of sexuality are my passion, or gender equality. And so one of the things that was really hurtful, again, I'm a sensitive person, I wear my emotions on my sleeve, during the campaign trail, especially for somebody who doesn't like to be out and about putting his life and business in the community and in public, was being the proud gay man while also being scrutinized as being an LGBT man. I mean, I came across a woman who said that I was running to turn bathrooms into, like, to ensure that girls and boys could share bathrooms. And so that's hurtful, right? Because that's not the case. Um, and I have to I have to take a step back and reflect and like calm myself down and be like, JC, you know that that is not what you're in this for. And your job is now to educate people to ensure that they know who you are, what your intentions are, and show it, and show that you are this incredible guy that I feel I am, right? Like I have to be my biggest champion. Um, through my work, right? And the conversations that I have with people and the end results in the projects that I take on and those things. And so definitely super hard and um, something that even in New Orleans, being the melting pot that we are, you know, having conversations of sexuality is still taboo in some instances. And so that's why I wanted to make sure that I answered those two questions, because I appreciate you bringing them up. Again, these are conversations that are not often discussed in teacher preparation programs, or in colleges, right? Like in college classes. And so I'm very grateful that you all were comfortable enough to ask me that.
Thank you so much for answering. And I'm so sorry you had to experience that, but I think the confidence and strength that you show is really, I think, inspiring for all the students on this call, and certainly for me. Do you have any final remarks?
I would love to just say thank you so much for inviting me, Dr. Hill, um, Professor, is it DeLuise? Thank you for your kind remarks. I would love to continue this kind of dialogue with you all. Dr. Hill, I shared with you that I would love for this to be a like multi-series. I don't know what it could be, but you know, I'm just really grateful that you all as professors are engaging in this kind of dialogue with your students. But more than anything, you know, once we get back to normal, I know it'll happen. If there's anything that I can do, I would love to come in and have some conversations and, you know, be a part of what you're doing, the larger work that you're doing. Please consider me a thought partner and just someone who is on this journey with you. And so before you all leave, I'm going to put my email address in the chat box. And if there's anything I could ever do, if you just need a listening ear as you are navigating the intricacies of public schooling and your educational journeys, you know, just call on me and I'll be there.
Thank you so much for that offer and for your partnership, and we would love to have you back. And thank you for your openness this evening, for kicking off our semester in such a strong way, and for the courage to decide to run for school board, and for your visions and your passion and all that I know that you'll achieve. So really, really thankful.
Thank you. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. All right, guys. Thank you so much.
This was so great.
I agree. I'm so excited. Dr. Hill, feel free to call me whenever you're done.
Okay, terrific. And all of my students, I'll see you back on Zoom in a minute on the other Zoom. And I know the other students are heading over to their sections as well. So
Great.
thank
All
you
right.
so much.
See you later. Bye, guys. Thank you so much.